said talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy... Flyover State of Fear.
Welcome back to Flyover State of Fear. I got another great guest for you, Josh Stifter. I hope I didn't stutter and pronounce that too wrong for you. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing great. No, you got it perfect.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a running joke that my parents named me Josh Stifter, which is like one of the hardest names to say. My grandma used to make the joke where she would say it like over and over again. She'd be like, "It's so hard to say Josh Stifter."
It's not, as I was saying it, I mean,
you got it perfect. You did it just
long
fine.
Chincharik, that's you have to hear it before you my last name, but I even apologize as I thought about it, and then that little stutter you get at this. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Josh is a writer-director of some pretty fun movies, The Good Exorcist, Greywood's Plot, and the upcoming Scumbag. Josh, how's it going? And tell a little about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a filmmaker. I made my first feature, The Good Exorcist, with Robert Rodriguez's Rebel Without a Crew. I work in the indie film world, low budget movies. Everything I've done has been made for like nickels and dimes, $7,000 of Robert Rodriguez's money, which is like such an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
In low indie filmmaking. It's like you're no budget filmmaking. You
still got it done. I look forward to, I was telling you before the show, look forward to viewing The Good Exorcist with a group I have that we watch the, indie filmmaking and more so like B-movie almost weekly. So that is like prioritized on our list of getting together.
I think it's a good one for that. It's a good movie for that. I think both of them are. Greywood's Plot and The Good Exorcist are good B movie for people who like indie film. They're the perfect kind, like truly indie film, not like the $1.5 million movie with Ryan Gosling that they call an indie film.
It was a small budget, but
yeah,
we did spend over $1 million and got Ryan Gosling.
And those are the movies that I grew up watching bad movies, and I really liked the movies that were kind of cheesy and didn't. They weren't perfect. I like things with flaws. Like one of my favorite, The Simpsons is my favorite show ever.
It's up there for me as well.
And I love, I remember when The Simpsons came out in HD, a lot of people were complaining about it because, I've got that somewhere over here too.
And I got the Funko version.
Dude, I gotta do this. This is gonna just take me a hot second.
Yeah. I love,
I literally have it right here.
Oh my god, yeah, in the playset. That is separate. It's underneath this desk by that, and then I have the pop right next to him. Not to cut you off, I just was taking down my Halloween, the Burger King Treehouse of Horror.
Oh, nice.
I eBayed 3 lots of them. Anyway, so, but about The Simpsons? Sorry, that caught my ear.
I love the fact that The Simpsons, now that, we've got our 4K TVs and stuff, one of my favorite things is watching The Simpsons and, going frame by frame, because I'm an animator by trade.
Oh, great.
And seeing the cells and the, drop shadow behind from the characters and looking at, the animation, the paint that's running off the edge. I love flawed things like that.
As a kid, I remember, I was watching, I would watch so much of the seasons of Simpsons I had, and then eventually you listen to the commentary, right? And I remember Matt Groening watching them, and him going, "Oh, you see that?" And then immediately you notice it was a leg. It's season 1 or 2. A leg is not colored in going over a desk or something.
Homer
Anyway,
has 2 noses at one point. Like, in
yeah,
season 2, there's, like, a spot where Homer has 2 noses, and you probably wouldn't notice it if you didn't watch them over and over again, but now they, like,
mm,
those things stand out to me like a sore thumb in the best way. The
yeah,
best sore thumb.
and you find that you talked about the like more of the TV and the HD or the 4K is I know there are a lot of movies like that now, especially like filmmakers didn't plan for that clarity, so they let things slide. Like one of my favorite horror movies of all time, and I do think it's and Poltergeist is here too. But it's like in Candyman, right? Like you could clearly there's one shot and as now like someone watched calls out like he barges through a window and you see the harness and everything like that.
Yeah.
And no one noticed that beforehand, you know. So
My
anyway,
favorite is seeing, like, the stunt drivers in action movies where you'll see, like, a stunt driver and before you never would have noticed it, but now you look and you're like, Sandra Bullock is a, like, 50-year-old man suddenly with a wig on, and you're like, "Oh,
the
we weren't supposed to
greatest
see that."
the greatest one is in Face Off on the boat chase. John Travolta and Nicolas Cage, they're stunt doubles jumping off, and you don't even need the high def for that one. They're wildly just two
No,
different men.
that is one of my favorites. That is such a
Yeah.
great one. But I like flawed movies, and I like movies that take weird risks and mix genre, like
Mhm.
Poltergeist. Like, one of the reasons I love Poltergeist is because it is this weird, like, family drama mixed with the kind of a family comedy mixed with horror, and the horror is, like, really creepy, but it's
It's deep. It
PG-13, but it's not an R-rated horror. It just jumps around so much.
no, it and soon jump around. I would jump to my thought here. I have a pretty deep, or I think deep relationship with the movie as well. So I do like to begin every podcast by asking though, what is you kind of already devolved into a little bit of it, your horror origin story, kind of like uh as a filmmaker, animator, but what got you into the genre? Because and as if you aren't into it or not into it, but I
I
you
am
are.
very into it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I say I'm very into it, but I'm kind of into all genres. Like, there isn't. I'm the kind of person who can actually watch a romantic
Oh,
comedy and
I
enjoy
love
it.
all
Like,
movies and romantic comedies, or so yeah.
and um, so and the same goes for horror, where there's stuff that there's a lot of horror that I'm personally not into. There's like a
Hmm.
specific kind of horror that I get. I understand why people like it, but I'm not really a jump scare person, which is
Okay.
ironically talking about Poltergeist, which has some of the best jump scares, but because they do it so differently, it works for me.
Well, done
But
right, it's done right.
done right, it's amazing. But it just the teenage horror
Mm.
movie that is just like jump scare after jump scare no, doesn't really do all that much for me. But I got into horror as a, like, 3-year-old. I My
Cool.
neighbor had, so I lived next to these 3 brothers, and one of them was my age, one of them was a little older, and then the 3rd one was, like, way older. Like,
Hmm.
I was 3, 4, whatever.
Sure.
This kid was, like, probably 11, 12, 13. And their parents did not care what they watched. Like, they would let them watch everything. So I was a little kid going over to their house, and Nightmare on Elm Street would be played, or
Oh yeah, yeah.
Chucky was a constant staple of my youth. And so I grew up watching horror movies. That was just on all the time. And then I got into uh as I started getting a little older, I got really into bad movies like Mystery Science Theater
Okay.
3000
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
watching the late night the crappy movies like the old 50s black and white Ed Wood type movies,
Yeah,
stuff like
Planet
that.
Nine or
Yeah,
Attack of the 50-Foot Woman or just that
loved it.
whole the brain that
So,
doesn't live or the brain that wouldn't die. Yeah, shit like
yeah,
that.
which but then becomes the head that wouldn't die or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so genius. And I loved that kind of stuff. So, um that's sort of where I would pick up a camera then, and my dad bought a VHS
Mhm.
camcorder when I was probably 5 or something like that, and the running joke in my family was just like you couldn't keep ketchup around for a week because I got the ketchup and there would be fake blood and everything. So I would do shorts where it was like, a little fake hand is crawling across the floor and there's blood being sprayed. There was one that we specifically did where we made it so it looked like a hand running across the floor, which was just used like crappy, kid-like effects, doing what we could, throwing a blanket over the edge or
that's amazing though.
Stuff like that. And then at one point we captured it in this little basket my mom had and tied a string to it, and it's like crawling around in the basket. We're like pulling the basket.
That's so good.
Those kind of little effects like that. And then I think the hand jumps out and grabs a friend by the throat and ketchup sprays out.
Yeah.
So I got I found I could get the most, not shock. I wasn't going for necessarily shock, but I could get the most out of people with making these little horror projects. So it made me even get into horror more when I started filming this stuff and then watching horror movies going like, how did they do it? And how did they do it?
Oh, such a fascinating part of everything.
And then, the mix of genre between comedy and horror work kind of in the same way. So I really gravitated towards comedy horror stuff like Toxic Avenger was a huge one for me because it mixed horror, comedy, vulgarity, blood.
The superhero from New Jersey, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Which was like a total, amazing moment in my life when Lloyd Kaufman called me up and was like, hey, you want to put The Good Exorcist on Troma? It was like, of course,
easily.
Like in a heartbeat. And then we did a whole Blu-ray. So The Good Exorcist is available.
Get that Blu-ray. I have a nice collection myself, and I will be ordering.
It's a great Blu-ray. It has Lloyd and I did an intro for it that is really funny to me.
I generally can't wait. I will be ordering that after our interview.
Awesome. Yeah. So, but I kind of grew up with horror movies and watched them my whole life, and then, it just continued on, and I still am a huge fan. I have a projector and a big projection screen in my condo, in the living room, and my favorite thing is I treat it like a drive-in. So
that's great.
Watching horror movies in my drive-in theater is like that's so fun. After we're done with this podcast, there's like a 95% chance that I'm going to go watch something on there. I watched Smile like 2 days ago in the projection screen.
I watched Smile last week of myself.
Yeah, and so yeah, huge horror fan.
That's great. I love that story and how you came to that, and I love to hear that you get to do your passion and like our unique little world of horror and everything for a living, and you get to run that through, and that's amazing.
Work with my friends and make these weird little indie films and
be an artist.
Yeah, and the way I've worked it, I haven't had to so far be told no by producers much. So I'm making movies that I'm at this point in my career, I'm making movies where I'm just like, I want to make the movies that I would be told no. Like I want to do the scenes where people would be like, you cannot put this joke in there. You cannot have, this stupid thing. And I'm like, I can though. I can have it. There's an animated sequence in Greywood's plot that it's sort of divisive. Some people don't like it, some people do, but it's Keith, who's one of my friends, tells this story about a killer hobo, like a cannibalistic hobo, and it cuts to animation, and we animated it and did it as this thing. And some people are like, it's so out there. It's such a strange moment. And at one point we talked, Daniel and I, Daniel's my best friend / producer / co-writer, and he acts and everything. He is Father Gill in The Good Exorcist.
Okay.
He and the titular Doug Greywood's in Greywood's plot. So Daniel, he's also my producer. So I sent him this scene, and we watched the movie a bunch of times, and it gets to that point, and we constantly were like, do we take this out or do we leave it in? And my go-to all the time was like, we will never get to put this scene in another movie. Like this scene.
No, it's your scene.
If we were working with a studio, they would tell us that one's gonna go. And I'm like, no, we got to keep it in there for now. Well, we can.
That's great, man. That's like so much fun because you hear the opposite or like a watered down version of like, yeah, I wanted to do that, and then it's a half truth. I love to hear that, and that's really fun, and yeah, I one thing I want to still in kind of what we were talking about right before we get to The Exorcist. I like how you've also pointed out that you grew up watching all that stuff, and you then pivoted towards like the quote unquote bad movies and
Yeah.
like the unique and horror comedy, and I relate to that myself a little bit too. It was like kind of like watching things since like 5 or whatever, and parents who didn't filter that stuff, and then eventually a little later it was like I wanted to start watching the trash, and I'm gonna revel in the trash, and it's so much fun.
Yeah.
Like, and I like, yeah. So I just want to say I relate to that a lot, and fall in love and making stuff with your friends, and it's so
I
awesome
think
to hear.
I think there's also this like thing where especially right now, to make something that isn't perfect instantly becomes like this is an imperfect thing. And there's like because there are negatives in it, people are like it's bad, it's negative.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always kind of looked at things differently where I'm like when it's perfect, when it's really polished and really great, I kind of lose interest because I don't feel any relatability to it. I don't
That's
feel like I don't want everything to be like 100% perfect. I want the emotion of having the good and the bad and the
for
everything and scenes that take risks and weird moments where you're like, "Oh my god, why did
why
they
did we
cut
go
it
there?
like that?"
Yeah,
Or what's going on here? There are
for
things in Poltergeist that I personally would not have done in the way they did it.
yeah.
And but at the same time, I'm like, I love that they did it because that's not what I would have done.
I'm curious. I'm interested to hear about that because this is definitely the first time I've seen this movie a lot, maybe not as much as you, but for a lot, that I've watched it and wrote notes down and was paying more attention to things in it than just watching it. And the only thing I want to add what you say is, yeah, I guess I find myself more critical of things that are perfect, right? You know, I have a Twitter opinion about a movie because everything wants to go polished. But if I'm going into something and I'm like, we're just watching it for warts and all and funny, there's
Yeah.
no need to be critical in the in the negative sense. So it's interesting to hear that, right? Like it's things too polished, right? Like I just saw the recent Black Panther
Okay.
What kind of forever
I haven't
fun
seen it
movie,
yet.
fun
Yeah.
movie, good movie.
Sure.
I did like my wife asked how it was, and I did have like not notes, but it was like here are
Yeah,
some
yeah.
thoughts that aren't just it was great because, and it was very good.
Sure.
And I probably wouldn't have said that if she said, "How's the Good Exorcist?" I'd be like, "It was a fucking blast,"
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the. So anyway, today we are talking about Poltergeist, and you have I was just a listener because you have one of my now favorite origin stories of that question. And all my guests have had good ones, but that is so unique and different. Um, but so I'd like to start this all off. We're talking about the original Poltergeist, and I do read the plot. And so anyone listening, or I have copy and pasted this, and I have not read it. And I do this because these plot descriptions, when you go to Google, are either two things: accurate, or it's 1982 a horror movie directed by Toby Hooper.
Yeah.
So we'll see what I say. All right.
I love it.
Strange and creepy happenings beset an average California family. The Freelings. Steve, Diane, teenage Dana, 8-year-old Robbie, and 5-year-old Carol Ann. When ghosts commune with them through the television set, initially friendly and playfully, the spirits turn unexpectedly menacing, and when Carol Ann goes missing, Steve and Diane turn to a parapsychologist and eventually an exorcist for help. So that's one of the more accurate summaries I've pulled.
Yeah.
So anyway, kind of said a little earlier, but like about the uniqueness of genres. But why Poltergeist? What drove you to wanting to talk about this today?
So there are first off, there are quite a few Poltergeist references in The Good Exorcist. Like at one point, Father Gill is literally holding up a sheet and he's like, "They're here," and then they all look at him like, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's like, "It's Poltergeist. I'm doing Poltergeist." And so like
Iconic.
that, yeah. So that you know, the fact that my movie is very much referential to that is one reason why, but also because it's a movie that I feel like there's a lot to talk about.
Mhm.
Positive and negative, but mostly positive, and when it is negative, it's
Yeah,
interestingly negative. There's nothing in this movie that I go, "I dislike this."
yeah. I
There's just
want to.
things where I'm like I mean, there's the I don't know if you know about this, but the sort of iconic Pizza Hut edit.
I learned about it today while watching this, and um, I mean, literally when we were messaging we were like trying to figure it out, I was like, shit, I just watched that this morning, and I
Yeah,
must have not been like paying attention because I've never noticed it. You know,
right.
the weird cut,
The weird, just
and
abrupt cut.
I'm note taking and I'm watching the movie and I'm typing and and I go wait, and I rewound it, you know, and Carol Ann's mouth doesn't match with I want food or I want
Yeah,
pizza
yeah.
or something, and it goes, and then the cut
They're,
when
like, walking to the door.
the cut they're walking to the door, the audio's still going, and I literally paused it. I'm reading about it, but I was like, I only thought it was I didn't realize this one. I'm like, I guess my Blu-ray's fucked up because
Yeah.
I know I got it from a secondary store, and I literally, and this happened an hour ago or 3 hours ago. I go to HBO Max. I knew I just watched it there and not my Blu-ray, and I rewind to the scene, and I say, okay. Then I went back to the Blu-ray because I'd rather watch it on my Blu-ray. But
Sure.
that is so weird, and I'm glad you brought that up immediately because it's kind of all then I thought about for the next 2 hours of the movie.
Yeah. 'Cause it's a like, especially as an editor, I when I saw it like, a few years ago, and I kinda know more about editing, and
Mm,
I can't, like, not pay
sure.
attention to the edit, and I think Daniel and I were actually watching it, and it happened, it jumped, and I was like, "What the hell was that?" And he was like, "That's the Pizza Hut edit." And so we went and looked it up to figure it out, and apparently the line that was in there was he says something like,
I
"Oh, I hate Pizza Hut," or
Yeah.
something like that, and Pizza Hut was not happy with it, and
Mhm.
so they cut it out, and instead of, like, trying to smooth the edit, they were just like, "Nope, chop it, move it, done, we're out."
It was chopped and moved. Like the word of the theory is like for like 2 weeks into release or like before release. So was that maybe it was never even seen by the filmmakers. That's like the theory.
Yeah,
And yeah, there's an article out there and they have the scene in the dialogue, at least what's in the script of like, and what's continues the scene is like some kind of big context of like relationship dynamics
yeah,
and things, and Joe Beth Williams is like, oh, you know, like almost describing it as a sexual experience of what she felt of the when being moved like that.
okay.
And I think that's what the script says, and there's an article. So, like, knowing all that context and rewatching, like, yeah, there is this big cut of, and there's another thing that, weirdly enough, speaking of sexual experience, that ties back to the end that was taken out of the movie too. But
Okay,
that's just, I think, a normal studio deleted scene.
sure.
The tentacle monster that drags her on the wall.
Yep,
And there's stills of it from I think a production book or something that they had
okay.
promo. So we have evidence of it, and they cut it out. I think was one of the main things to help them avoid a R
R
rating
rating.
because it was very like implying a heavily like sexual assault type.
Sure.
So
The Poltergeist got a little rapey.
yeah, and knowing that kind of and then seeing that, it was like, oh yeah, there's so much context of what's going on because the scene still acted the same or
So
cut
that's
it.
I mean, bigger picture, that's one of the reasons why I like this movie, and one of the reasons why I picked it is because my movies are very mixed media. They're very like comedy and horror,
Mm-hmm.
and in Greywood's plot, there's a very abrupt change. Like it goes from being essentially like a clerk style comedy for 45 minutes to being a undeniably a horror movie.
Okay.
And um it's I like that. Like
Yeah.
you don't see it very often that people do this. I mean, Greywood's plot, it definitely that strikes people in a big way. But Poltergeist does it too, in that it is like because they were trying to avoid that R rating, but it also is, you know, Toby Hooper and Steven Spielberg making a horror movie where
Hmm.
Steven Spielberg is always kind of teetering this weird place of, you know,
Especially at that time. Like,
yeah, and his movies are so you iconically should be. There's moments where you're like, how did this R-rated scene get into a PG-13 movie?
hmm
Like I can think of a handful of scenes just off the top of my head where I'm like, he has two dinosaurs bite a guy and tear him apart and throw him. Like that is an
but it's
R-rated moment in in Lost World, or the scene in a War of the Worlds with the bodies floating down the river where you're just
oh
like,
yeah.
this is an R-rated scene in a PG-13 movie. Like
He
he's great at that.
he
So then
hides
you throw in the Texas Chainsaw director, and obviously we're going to get something absolutely
and
wild.
and Toby Hooper at that time, is he making this? Is he kind of the same year Texas 2 coming out? Is that the same
It
year?
has to be pretty close. Like they
It's
have to
close
be
because
around.
it's like you have that, and his sensibilities are like, okay, I'm going more, with Texas 2. It's like, you
I
know,
love that movie. That
if
movie is to me an
yeah,
absolute
you had that on your
masterpiece. Yeah.
list, also, and maybe come back and do that one, or not maybe come back and do that movie, and it's there, right? And you have that, but that movie is like tongue in cheek and a full blown horror comedy.
Right.
It's just gross.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then you have Steven Spielberg like starting to ease because E.T. comes out the same year.
Yeah, so he's
I-
and that was like the big rumor was like when I was a kid, I didn't quite like as a filmmaker now and as an adult and watching it and getting it and knowing how the business works, I- Spielberg is a producer and he's a
mm,
hands-on producer. So there is undeniably Steven Spielberg's fingerprints all over this. He probably actually did come in and direct some scenes and stuff. But
yeah,
then there is undeniably Toby Hooperisms happening where you're like, the fact that, like, mom and dad are sitting in their bedroom at the beginning of the movie smoking a joint, I'm
yeah,
like, "That is not a Spielberg moment. That is
no,
a Toby
it's
Hooper moment."
and it also even the fact that there's this over scoping, you know, political commentary of the
Yeah.
'80s just in plain sight. And I literally one of the early notes is, people complain today of, oh, things are too political. It's like it's always been there. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
he's reading a book about like the Reagan presidency or like
Yes.
the takeover, I forget the exact name. And I mean, the movie starts off with the national anthem playing, and it's
That's right, yeah.
predominantly played throughout. And it's really just whether it was Steven Spielberg's script or Toby Hooper or not. And I mean, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre original is also a look at like the Vietnam War,
Yep.
and there's themes there. That's more Toby Hooper is that, and I mean, yes, Steven Spielberg, especially this time with Gremlins. There's some reminiscence. He does love terrorize the suburban town.
Yep.
Um, Especially that ending. I'm like, this is just that Gremlins ending when basically the bodies are popping up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we start off exactly that way, and I like where you got to, just the parents smoking weed in the bedroom, and it's uh it's a really beautiful, like, one thing I'm taking away from this watch is I'm more taking notes, and they're a really beautiful relationship they have on screen. It's a really nice uh representation. We have a mother and a father in a movie that you don't get actually often.
There's a very with everyone in the movie, there's a very sincere look at actual families, or like
Hmm.
an actual family. Like, it feels like, um um, what was I trying to say?
You're just
It's
actual families,
yeah. It's dynamics that you would see in a real household, which I
Mhm.
think was Spielberg's big thing at the time. Like we watch E.T. and the way they're like sitting around the what does he say? Some calls it
Penis
penis
breath?
breath.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see those moments where you're like, this is what having this family would
Mhm.
actually be like.
Oh,
And in this you get that. And it's one of the things that like as a kid when I watched this movie didn't really connect with me, but as an adult when I watch it, it that's my favorite part is watching the way they talk to each other, watching the way
my
the whole family plays off of one another. It feels real.
I like that you say that because one of my favorite parts of this movie, or the whole movie as a whole, is it handles silence really well. My favorite parts are the quiet moments. And like I said, the family dynamics, right? Like burying the parakeet or the bird, or and the little brother playing around like fucking with his little sister is kind of a perfect dynamic of all of that going on. You see how they function, but they're happy together, and the dad's busy, but whatnot. And I mean, the movie even starts on a gag of like the remote changing of the neighbors. Like it's just it's simplified chaos in a gag that's
Yeah.
fun. It brings you into that world. I do want to ask about part of the uh I can't help but that analyzing the set decoration of the children's room is like one of the all time because the posters are widely ranging, and the main piece is the alien poster for this 6-year-old and this,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, this what 10-year-old and the
10-year-old, something
6-year-old.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, what? Okay, the Star Wars makes sense, the Super Bowl makes sense, and I do want to say I'm not gonna try to get into any of like the curse stuff here and that. That's all really sad and just real life tragedy. And
Right.
um,
Yeah.
but there is a thing about the Super Bowl poster that is super eerie.
I
Um,
don't know if I know this.
oh, okay, so it's for a Super Bowl 1988. So they made it like 6 years before or later.
Okay.
And they said Pasadena, California, and if I get the city right, it's something in California, and so it's all on the poster. They don't get the teams right, but they get the date right,
Interesting.
and that date, I believe they get the date right. But what's eerie about it is that's the day that I think they either that Carol Ann, the actress who plays her, was diagnosed with her illness.
Oh,
So I'm saying there's just
yeah, I
another one
guess
of that.
I did hear this story. I did
Yeah,
know that.
it's
Yeah.
another one of that layer to that really sad thing, and I read it today, and I do want to, if anyone is listening, and you do want to learn about the cursed and that, and whatever your thoughts are, um, there is a Shutter episode for cursed films about this movie, but I always recommend E True Hollywood Stories did it.
Okay.
I think they did it better,
All right. Right on.
and because I think it's like an hour and a half. It's a full blown documentary, and that's where I so if you asked me at the age of, let's say, 13 or something, I would have said, yeah, Poltergeist is a good movie. It's starter horror. Don't think it's that scary. Um, I think it's good. I don't think it's that scary. Man, a 13-year-old,
Right.
you think everything, your opinion matters. And then I watched the documentary, get a little more creeped out by it, just by the reality of it. But I'm also like 15 at this time.
Sure.
Ever since then, this movie terrifies me. I mean, it's the only movie that I know of that I started off going, I don't find it. I find it normal. I would say, oh, you could watch it. Starter horror. Like my wife doesn't like horror movies, but I would
My
have
wife hates
said,
them.
oh, it's easy. You can handle it. The older I've gotten, when I've had apartments and homes and responsibilities, I don't have children yet, but all that, this movie becomes scarier and scarier. And for our main show, we just did a top 10 favorite horror movies. I put this at like 6.
Yeah.
It gets me.
So I have found that movies that scare me the most are the ones or creep me out the most are the ones that I initially didn't find all that scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they need to live in my head a little bit and I
That
need to
happened to me.
grow with them. So like this is one of them for sure.
It's
When I was a
happened to
kid,
me.
this movie was not scary because there's
No,
not that many jump scares. There are a couple,
it's the
but
clown. It's
yeah,
really the tree,
that's
the
it.
clown. Honestly, even like the face peeling, like that never creep. Well, the clown shit creeped me out because it's a creepy scene. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you, Josh, on that. Like it grew. It grew into the sense where I go, it's 10 o'clock. Maybe I want to go to bed at midnight. I don't need to throw that on because then I'm going to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are like my favorite, and Toby Hooper has a couple of them on my list that are like that. But like when I was a kid, we watched so much horror, and then everyone talked about The Shining.
Mhm.
And when I saw it when I was a kid, I was like, "This is lame. Like, there's nothing scary about The Shining. This is totally fine." And then I got to the point where I had kids, I had a mortgage, I was writing a lot, I was working on stuff. I was working for Kevin Smith at the time, doing animations from his podcast,
Oh, cool.
and I was working a full-time job as well. So I was working like 40 hours plus 40 hours every week, like
Shit.
40 hours at my day job and then 40 hours to get these videos done for Kevin that I had to get done like every 2 weeks. I had to have a video done. And I don't know why, but for some reason I was working really hard and was like, I want to watch The Shining. Oh, I know why, because I actually did an animation based on it was we called the episode The Brining. It was Kevin was talking with his friend Brian Johnson about The Shining, and the joke became like him losing his mind
Okay.
and whatever. So I was animating this thing. I'm like, well, I got to watch The Shining to get into the right mindset for this. And I watched it and was like, oh my god, this is terrifying. I
Yeah.
am Jack Torrancing real hard
Yeah,
right
you
now with
really are
all this work.
paralleling
Yeah.
that wow. But yeah, you're not to really fully distract, but that is where that Shining story is amazing, and that's what happens though. And that I mean that's the sign of a good story and a good movie. But
Yeah,
that is
and
the
when you can
Poltergeist
relate to
for
it
me.
you can relate to it at a certain point in your life and it hits home. And so then I got to the point where I was putting on The Shining, and for years The Shining was my favorite movie. Like if
Mhm.
anyone asked, I'd be like The Shining,
Okay.
favorite movie ever. It's because it hit me so hard right then that I was putting it on in the background while I worked, and it was just playing on my like second monitor or third monitor, like
It's always on.
24/7, just repeating. And my wife would come downstairs and she'd be like, "You're creeping me out watching
Mhm.
this so
It's
much."
a little too repetitive.
Yeah, and I'm like, I put it on because anytime I start to get depressed or feel shitty or
Mhm.
feel like I'm losing my mind working on these animations, I can always just go like, "At least I'm not Jack Torrance
That's
right
great.
now."
That's great. Yeah. Oh my god, that's the parallels right there.
Yeah. But,
So
Poltergeist to me right now hits especially hard. Well, I watched it, like, a few months ago. I put it on again,
mhm.
and I didn't watch it, like, right before this. I just didn't have the time and
Sure,
things were
yeah. I mean,
going
you know
on.
the
But
movie.
I know the movie so well that I was like, I don't I could talk about it for days without
Yeah.
having to see it again. But I watched it a few months ago, and that stuff hit really hard because I'm like, I there was a part in the movie I always hated, and it's when they finally think they've got the poltergeist out of the house.
This house is
The
clean.
house is clean, and she gets in the tub, and I was
Yeah.
always like, who do who would do that? Like, there's no way in my never. And then as an adult, I was watching it a few months ago, and I'm like, God, that does seem like something my wife would do. My
Mhm.
wife would be like, "No, I'm gonna go
It's
hop in the
over.
tub. It's over. We're done." And I'm fine. I'm like, there's just something. There's something very relatable about the
It's
way that they all play out. Even the way the
yeah.
kids act, the way the little boy acts reminds me of my son a lot. Just being, just I don't know, there's
Yeah.
parallels, and when you get those parallels, it makes it extra creepy.
No, I get it. I get it. Yeah, it's looking at it and then it's the ways. The only thing I still and no one can convince me wrapping my head around is the like the placement of the clown puppet everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? The sitting in front of the bed in the rocking chair. I'm like, no way. Even if it doesn't scare you, it's gonna scare me at night.
Yeah.
You know, and then like maybe Carol Ann's young enough where she just wants to hold the clown like in the second scene when they're being wrapped into at the end scene when she's sleeping with the client,
Yeah, right.
other than that, that's the only thing in this movie you can't convince me that makes sense.
I
uh,
think that's a very Toby Hooper. So those kind of moments are the ones to me that just scream Toby Hooper,
mhm.
because Toby Hooper has a very weird his his perspective on reality versus movie reality. Sometimes he visually show things that are very on the nose. Like, this is supposed to be creepy. I'm going to make it way
Yeah,
creepier than could ever
it's
happen in real life. With that being said, my kids have some toys that sit out in their room that I am like, that is like kind of creepy. Like, that stuffed animal, it doesn't. Yes, it's not the clown. The clown is
yeah.
next level
That's
creepy,
what that's.
but it's selling it.
I mean, it's one of the original. I'm saying one of my favorites, but as I think is yours is like it's like the original Child's Play, right? It's like that doll. I mean, I know children, they have the Buddy doll, which is very similar. Even without the Charles Lee Ray look of it, it's still
It's
like
creepy.
creepy.
My kids
Uh,
won't even look at it. My kids won't like it was a running. My kids wouldn't even say Chucky. If I
I
said
get it.
Chucky, they would be scared. But it's all based on the visual. They've
Hmm.
never seen the movies. They have no idea anything about Chucky. They've just seen that doll and it terrified them for years.
Oh,
Finally, my kids are a little past that. But like I was watching the new Chucky series and they
I
walked in
loved
at
it.
one
Yeah,
point and they were just like they were fine with it, which
yeah.
surprised me because
People
I
still
thought
have
they'd
that.
lose their mind.
Yeah, people. That's a whole talk about people who were given earlier allowed to seemingly on surface do what they want with the story.
Oh,
That's the Child's Play franchise ever since Don Mancini's had full range. So much fun. But even like I've mentioned a billion times in every podcast, my wife can't do horror movies. She still has that of as a kid burnt into her brain of what Chucky is in
yeah.
that sense. And I'm like, no, you would like this if you watched it because it's funny.
It's something completely different than what
And
you think, but
they can't get over. Speaking of things I have, yeah,
nice.
too, you can't get over the hump. Anyway, so I don't know. I'm gonna jump up here because really, I mean, there's so much to this, and I always remember finding it crazy to me that so I'm 30, and I would say when I was 12 or 13, they used to play Mad TV a lot on Comedy Central or whenever that
Yeah, yeah,
dropped,
yeah.
and I remember being dumbfounded putting two and two together that Joe Beth Williams was the you know, one of the main comedic, actresses on Mad TV.
Yeah.
And just like that casting, right? Like all my
It,
notes say call Craig T. Nelson coach.
I,
Coach did this, and
honestly, it was my thing as a kid. One of the reasons I didn't like Poltergeist when I was younger, or it
hmm
wasn't like one of my top horror movies, is
hmm
literally because I could not get over the fact that it was Coach.
yeah,
Like in my little kid head was just like, it's
that's
just Coach.
coach.
It's Coach. I can't get over it. Um, as an adult now, I've essentially forgot Coach, and now Craig T. Nelson is
Just
Poltergeist. Like that's what I think of.
yeah, he's Steve.
Which is funny how it changes. Like with time, it can change.
hmm Um, so she does do that, right? And we already said like the with the Pizza Hut scene, I think is a good way to put like chairs start moving around, and I
Dude,
mean,
that
fuck,
scene is one of my favorite scenes. It's
and
just iconic, the rearranged chairs.
and how excited like Joe Beth Williams is about like what's going on. She's intrigued, and she's like, there's a spirituality to her thought behind it,
Yeah.
and she comes home, and I think I'd be more Steve in this scenario, being like, what? This is
This is
really
terrifying.
off.
Yeah, this is
And
really not cool.
I like that they go to the neighbors. And by the way, I forgot to mention, and uh, the last night, the disturbances are already starting to happen. The TV scrambly with the there here, and the house had like a large earthquake that fucked up each room. and no one else had heard it, right? So it's weird, but nothing they're like too thinking about. The one thing I know we're still really early in the movie, but I noticed this time of watching is the way that glass breaks into the brother breaks into the older sister's cereal. Never
Okay.
noticed that before.
I don't even. No, I
You
don't
know what I'm
know
talking?
either. No.
They're sitting at the kitchen table. It's like
Yeah.
right before the chair scene, kind of. It's breakfast, and he's drinking the milk, and it just pops
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
glass
yeah, yeah, yeah,
pops
yeah, yeah,
out
yeah,
from the
yeah.
bottom.
Right. I know what you're talking about.
First time I ever noticed that in this movie because it's the ghosts,
Yeah.
but it also just looks like he broke the glass.
Right.
I rewound it. There's nothing in the frame that shows any force of a glass being broke.
Right.
Amazing. So all that goes on. They go to bed at night, and this is I would say, her first wave of terror. Right?
Yeah.
It's and that's where this movie, and you have the Spielberg score well, this is Jerry Goldsmith, but that
Yep.
intoxicating suburban score, and then when the crazy shit happens, it's more the sounds of the room and the silences it lets go and does not give you that score.
Yeah.
Um and so this is when the fucking tree, and my dad, by the way, had that talk with me about lightning once, about counting backwards.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But the tree, it goes, and all of a sudden, like, wind's going around in the room, and the kids are freaking out, and the tree busts through, and it's going to eat. Why do I keep wanting to call him Mike? It's not
I
Mike.
think it's Robbie. Isn't it
Yeah,
Robbie?
Robbie. It's Robbie. We're gonna eat Robbie, and Carol Ann's holding on for her life, and they're running around. They have no idea what's going on, and I mean, literally, the ghosts are coming after the two youngest children. I
Yeah.
mean, Robbie
Right.
would have been dead if they didn't wrestle him down. Yeah, so they're going through that, right? And as that's going on, they save Robbie from like this tree, and there's a tornado, but it's only hitting their house.
Right.
Yeah, Carol Ann gets sucked into the closet, into the light of the closet, and they hear her through the TV. They're screaming her name, and she cries out, "Mommy," or something of the lines, and that's kind of where I would say the point of it, the charm of anything, just it's horror.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So to me, like you're you hit the nail on the head with using a Jerry Goldsmith score and giving it that. It's Spielberg, but it also is like Jerry Goldsmith did like the Omen score.
Yeah.
So it still has that like that creepiness to it,
Mm-hmm.
but then it does something really different that is one of the reasons why I'm like there's no way that Toby Hooper wasn't massively involved because letting those silences breathe is not uh, the Spielberg of it. That
No,
is
he
such
wants
a
you to know the emotions.
yeah, that's a Toby Hooper thing through and through. Give him the like build, especially coming off of
Mm-hmm.
like Texas Chainsaw. Like there was Texas Chainsaws filled with those moments
It's
of just
quiet.
hearing like the crickets in the field. Like that's all you hear. It's just the sound of what's around. And I think that's one of the things that makes it hit harder, or it's one of the things that works really well for me that sets it apart from a lot of other,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not jump scare horror is that the tension because of those silences and the tension because of the hearing the little girl, through the TV, it's
Mommy,
unnerving. Yeah,
Mommy,
it's
like
so unnerving.
and as a viewer, especially, you don't know what's coming. You don't know if she's alive. You don't know if you're going into the unknown. Like, we know the movie,
Right.
but so unnerving. It goes. My note at that point is, you go from 0 to 20, then to 1,000. Like,
Yeah.
it's this big jump, Um, so yeah, it's I noticed now you mentioned the Jerry Goldsmith and the Omen. If anyone listen, let the credits play next time with that because it starts with the same score, and then there's the chants. There's
Yeah.
the angelic chants in it that you don't hear in the movie, but you hear at the end. I'm like, now you say it, I'm like, yeah, that's there because it's not creepy until it's creepy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, so um, then they do a quick jump, and what I do love about this is there's no, even though it's a little longer, there's no time wasted. They're like, how do we fix this? They go to the university. So coach goes to the university, and they go find parologist, paranormalologists, parapsychologists. Sorry, yeah,
You're a
that's a,
psychologist.
and they get right over there with all their equipment,
Yeah.
and they go through. And I love the one guy being like, "Yeah, we recorded this thing. It took 10 hours, but you see it crawl right across the thing." And they open the door to the bedroom, and shit's just rolling around. That I will say is probably Spielberg there because there's a little too
Yes.
much cutesy stuff going on.
Very
Not in a
Spielberg.
critique, but it's very like,
No, it is very Spielberg.
yeah. And they're
It's
like,
got a
"Oh,
it's got a funness to
yeah."
it's like fun and over the
Toys are
top and
playing,
yeah.
and the record's going, and that's going there, and um, they're just straight up in disbelief, and this is where we get my kind of first thing. And the one thing I do find funny of watching it just a little is how Diane, the oldest daughter, goes away, and Robbie, they're like, we'll just keep him here with us.
Yes. Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
instead of as if they don't have another friend or family to be like, take your brother, like,
Get him out of here.
yeah. But it calls for a great scene with him still there, with the conversation between the parapsychologist and Robbie and Joe Beth Williams, or Diane, or I'm jumping around with characters' names here. Um, whispering. This movie is, the whisper acting is like off the charts. They're just talking, and they're talking about the human soul and people being passed on, and even the parapsychologist, you get this really like beautiful, not full on monologue, but like thing about like how she feels failed and wasted,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's Toby Hooper. That's a little like that there's no purpose for that there, and it fits, and it's right also then before you get another burst of creep.
Yeah, but so one of the things I really like about this movie is those moments are given time to breathe and let us really enjoy characters who I mean, how far into the movie are we at this point? Like
We're 50
50
minutes?
minutes? That's what I
Yeah.
was gonna say, 50 minutes, and we're getting new characters
Mm.
who are, talking about their emotions. Most
Yeah, it's
movies
great.
don't do that. Most movies aren't gonna be like, "We're gonna introduce a character, and then they're gonna have a monologue about something
About things, and I don't
in
need
their
that.
life,"
Yeah.
that, most movies would be like, "We can't do that. You can't introduce a character that late and do
No.
something like that." With that being said, though, that's a Toby Hooper thing, but also look at the way Spielberg did stuff like that he's done stuff with, um, the character I mean, Jaws, you spend all of
Mhm.
Jaws following one guy, and then 35 minutes in, another guy comes in, and then another guy comes in, and then we're given this, like, quint monologue after you've barely
Just
got to know the guy, just he's a rough and tough guy, and then he's
Mhm.
giving this, like, heartfelt speech, this sad, dark speech, and, like, I like that kind of stuff. I love
Yeah.
when a character who maybe isn't the main character or a movie that's, s- now it would only revolve around this family. I mean, I don't people do crazy stuff in movies now still. I hate when people say like now they would never do that. That's not true.
No,
Someone would do
it's
that, but the fact that they did it in this, it shines to me.
yeah, it's great. Like I don't know if that existed in the remake, to be honest with you. That
I
completely
have
came
never
in
seen the remake.
I think I tried to put it on. I put it this way: I tried to put it on once, and I don't remember if I ever
It's
complete it
like
to
Sam
watch.
Rockwell was in it.
Yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
cast. It's
it's a
just
great cast. Yeah,
it's just something that should have been touched.
yeah,
But you're right. It's this little moment that breathes because even right before that, you still get like this weirdness of like 'cause even the character dynamics of the at this time the three paranormal investigators,
yeah,
the two guys, and the one guy is like, "I'm gonna go upstairs, fuck it," like, and he's already seen the room crazy, and he's still not listening, and he
yeah,
gets bit, and there's this big shark bite basically on his side.
yep.
And once again, that guy doesn't listen twice. He's the guy who then in the next scene
It's ripping off his
rips
face.
his face off. But also the most wild move is I'm going in the kitchen to get something to eat, and he pulls out a full on steak.
I know.
I'm gonna fry up a steak at midnight, and he's eating a cold chicken wing. But that I understand. The steak, I was like, huh? And then you get this great shot of the steak rotting out and slithering across the countertop.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
it's it's a 5 minute, or probably not even a 5 minute scene, but it's 5 minutes of just a nightmare for this man. It's this to the face rip, which this is one of those movies though. Sometimes it's like Family Guy ruined because they just recreated it in scenes, and then when I'm watching and going, why am I remembering the Family Guy moment of it? You know,
Yes.
where he's picking at the skin, and then like in I love it, and I love that '80s effect of the fake head. Like recently, I talked about Terminator on this, and it's like the same type of head prosthetic
Yep.
where he pops out the eye to.
All in on the practical of it, which this movie has a lot of crazy effects.
Mhm.
Some look great still, some don't
Yeah,
really stand the test of time, but there's something about the face rip that just like looks so raw and nasty that I still love it. And that's actually Steven Spielberg's hands.
that's whose hands it was. I knew it was one of the many times I read fun facts or whatever. I knew it was
Yeah.
one of their hands.
I'm pretty sure it was Spielberg's hands, which to me is like I feel like not to keep going back to the Toby Hooper versus Steven Spielberg theories, but I feel
Mm,
like Steven Spielberg is working on E.T. at the same time, and he's obviously putting his heart and soul into E.T. I feel like this movie was like the getaway fun time for
yeah,
Spielberg, so maybe he was really hands on because he was like, we're just making something crazy
I
over at this
believe it
lot.
because
I want to be the hands that rip the face.
yeah, whatever, and then just approve it. Because what I've read a little bit about it, and well, it was more be honest with what's on the Wikipedia. It's like there's two thoughts here: is it was truly a team effort in the sense, and like the effects guys and everything, and knew eventually to need to get approval from both men because one would if it had happened. I think the steak thing actually that Toby, they filmed the whole thing, and Toby Hooper was like, "Sure," and Steven Spielberg was like, "Nah, that's
Yeah.
not how it's done." And then I think what blew up the conspiracy more is later in life, Zelda Rubinstein,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
gave like a scathing interview of how she was like, "Well, when Spielberg filmed all of my scenes, and she only
Yeah, she
filmed
was
for
like the 6
6 days,"
days I was there. Yeah, she's like the
and
6 days Spielberg was there, and she said something about Toby Hooper like needing to be on substances whenever he was
yeah,
there or something.
and him being not fully there for like the shoot or the conversation. He was like 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out more. And then there's the other side of it that kind of conflicts it, where it was just like people were just like, no, Toby Hooper was just thrilled to be working with a man like Steven Spielberg,
Yeah.
where he was like, I'm collaborative. Let's do anything. This is my movie, but it's everyone's movie. And the second almost sounds more in line with what you learn about who he is as a director, because is known as a very nice and friendly person who is
Yeah.
a also hands-on collaborative. So it's interesting because we might not be talking about it as much if she never gave those interviews later in life.
And I also think like I haven't read the interview. I don't know
I only
exactly
read
what
the clip on the Wikipedia, so everything I'm saying take with a grain of salt.
yeah, but I think I mean, I've worked on sets. I've worked on a lot of sets, and
Mhm.
a lot of times the director is focused on a specific thing happening. There's a high chance that Spielberg did work with her that entire time, and she barely saw him because he could have been working on a million other things that are happening at the
I
same time,
mean,
and she's a secondary character to what's happening. So
she's about to be she's the showstopper, but she's a
yes,
secondary character. You're
yeah,
right. She
yeah,
is a secondary character of what is happening.
and I don't know if you don't know what's happening when you're making a movie. A lot of times you don't know what works, what is a
Mhm.
showstopper, what's hitting. So, yes, obviously she was a huge part of the movie and one of the iconic things that we all still talk about. But at the time, he may have been like, I got to make sure I get this kid's performance right
Mhm.
because that is actually what holds the movie
Oh, you're.
together. Maybe Spielberg is working with her. So I kind of see both sides where I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know who was doing what. I don't know what's happening. I have no idea, but that
You're right.
logically, that could have been her perception of what was happening and been completely right, but also completely wrong because
Well,
Toby Hooper was working his ass off doing something else.
I understand it completely. We all have jobs, and when I'm an art director, and I have my small team, and I have listening today. I have a deep voice. I tell people I work with, hey, I'm never mad at you. Sometimes I'm just busy, and if I say something quick, it sounds
Yeah,
angry
yeah,
because my voice is deep.
yeah.
It's true. Every person, and they go, huh? And I go, just it will happen. Just and I understand that because I'm busy. I'm not busy on something, but I have to, as any drive, I have to approve what you're asking me, but I might not get my full attention until it needs it.
Right.
Um, so, but you're right. Yeah, there's different perspectives. So anyway, that interview's there and whatnot, but it's a collaborative film, and film's a collaborative process. So, and I love that we're talking about it in the sense of like you see the DNA of both men in the movie. That you
Totally.
um, so so we have that scene, and that kind of ends the night, though, right?
Yep.
The like the horror there, and they wake up, and oh, I'm sorry, we do get one scene where they Carol Ann kind of the spirit or essence of the TV because it comes
Oh
through,
yeah,
and
that's right.
it's pretty important. I feel like she goes through, and she's like, we could smell her, and they know she's still there, and everyone's pretty traumatized though by that scene, and they do see the ghosts, like a gaggle of them, a gang of them, walk down the stairs
Right.
from the room, and because of the scene, I have his name down, but the one production guy who ripped his face, he's done. He's like, I'm out. I called him production guy. He's not, but he might have
Yeah.
been. Maybe he's part of the crew, and they're like, come on, act. Um, and then the other guy is going to stay back with Joe Beth and the family, and then the parapsychologist, she has a deep connection with this family. She's like, I'm going to be back, and she does come back, as we said with Zelda Rubinstein, um, who does steal the show. But a little bit before that, Craig T. Nelson is his boss comes by, the head developer of this plan, and this is kind of where I think we get just enough lore too, which I really like. It's not like crazy. It's not. I think what the sequels do, and I'm not too familiar with 2 and 3. Um, he thinks he's skipping out on work, right? They've been gone for they've been off for like a week. This kids haven't been in school, and he's like, you don't have the flu, but like, can I show you something? And he brings them up to the top of the valley in California, and I love the reveal. We get a reveal of a cemetery, and he
Yep.
goes, I'm going to build you a home right here in our new development, looking over everything because we want to keep you. Like, you've been the best salesman, and tells him that, we should have made you a partner and everything. But then he reveals one big thing. He goes, well, we're going to remove the cemetery. We did it down there.
Yep.
And kind of, coach, okay, doesn't, is disturbed, but doesn't even put 2 and 2 together until I love one of his last lines of, you move the body, you move the headstones, but not the
The
bodies.
bodies. Yep.
Um, anyway, so we get that right. And then
It's such a great delivery. It's so angry. He's just the way he says it. It's yeah.
I mean, they're popping out. I actually, because I forgot. I always forget certain things in movies, and I actually forgot how intense that last scene. Because remember the swimming pool, right, and
Yeah,
driving
yeah.
away. there's always a little bit in between. I'm always like forgetting. I know I'm jumping way to the end, but my favorite film of all horror movies of all time is Nightmare on Elm Street, and that long hallway that never ends that she has to run through is straight out of Nightmare.
Yes. Yeah.
It's so good. So anyway, now where we're at in the movie in our conversation though, Robbie and the dog. I love that the dog lives. I've been seeing way too many movies where they're just killing these dogs for shock value. Goes actually, don't tell us where they go. They just get in a cab and they drive away.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no
right.
adult. There's no anything. It's just bye. Call
Bye.
me. I was like, you better call. He's like 7. But they send the kid away. And we get introduced to Zelda Rubinstein. What's her name in this? As Tangia.
Yeah.
Who,
right.
I mean, just from her stature, the way she speaks, does steal her bit.
100%.
And walks in and owns the movie and goes around. And this the one character thing I did write down that stood out for me is because of everything he went through, how dismissive Craig T. Nelson is of her immediately. Just being like, why is she here? What are we going to do with an exorcist? You know, and it's, you know, they rectify it quickly. Like, he's not a skeptic until, but he does no other signs of that beforehand. So it was like, okay. And, you know, she gives this explanation because she's like, I have to go in the room when this house has many hearts. And she does that, and she has wit too. She's like, you got to get down here. I'm gonna crank my neck from talking to you. And you know, she takes Jo Beth Williams' hands, and she feels everything that's going on. And she's like, your daughter's here and alive. There's a lot of beings living here, and it's this awesome monologue she gives. I don't know if it qualifies as a monologue. We'll just call it speech, but
yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a monologue.
Yeah, she gives 2 awesome monologues. She just
Yeah.
holds her hands and she's like, your daughter's here. But then she's but she's like, there's a deep evil that's blocking everything. You know. And basically it's like, all right, and we gotta get her out. And so they're you know, at first she does say, she's like, run to the light, Carol Ann, run to the light, Carol Ann. I'm gonna do some bad impressions with this one.
It's pretty good.
Carol Ann, run to the light. And you know, we get another night kind of thing, and they use I forgot to mention one thing I love. They use Robbie's idea. Robbie the night before talks about, why don't we just tie a rope and go in?
He does. Yeah.
It's like it's a very kid-like idea.
It's a simple concept.
And they're like, huh. So, you know, and you get this feeling, because this is now Spielberg. There's wonder here, right? The investigator that stayed behind is named Ryan. Ryan's throwing the tennis balls into it, and he's amazed, and there's that goo. And I don't know if anyone ever sees this movie, I don't think you could ever forget the jelly that's on everything.
Yes. Yep.
And all right, so they throw the rope in, and they're standing there, and in the room, and the wind's whipping, and another Spielberg is him and his buddies out to him. They love a silhouetted kiss, and you know, and the window blowing, and it's very like romantic. And there is a great joke that happens in between all this tension and horror, where she goes, "I'll go in," you know, and Zelda is like, no, I'll go in. You've never done this before. And Jo Beth Williams goes, neither have you. And she goes, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, you go. Like it's so funny, but it's perfect because that. And she goes in and there's some tension, right? And she pulls her daughter out, and they're both. And please correct me if I've missed anything, really, but they're both just in distress, and they bring him to the bathtub. And this scene actually made tear up and get emotional of the parents saying breathe and he's telling her breathe and the love and they're filming everything, but they put their cameras down. Then they said let the family be, and that's when she gets her iconic line, "This house is clean."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I stole that for the Good Exorcist as well. So there's like maybe 3 stolen moments in the or references to Poltergeist, which the first exorcism he does, it's like he's dancing to death metal music and the girl like vomits blood or like this black goo all over as she is exorcised, and he leaves and he's like, this house is clean even though it's like a mess behind them. Then I also did one where all of these like tchotchkes or whatever that the mom has are like spinning around Stanley at a scene too,
Okay,
which
cool.
I stole from like the spinning stuff in the room, and I just did my like very low budget version of it.
That's great.
And then I did there's a scene, I didn't do it in one take, I did a cut, but I did Dan walks from one room, he's like checking out the area, he walks from one room into another room and then walks back, and between the time that he walks from one room into the next, the whole room gets destroyed. Like everything is on the floor, the couch is flipped and stuff. We did it like we had the camera move from one room to the other, and then as we moved back, I stopped the camera on the door hinge or whatever, and then we basically paused, we tore the room apart, and then I kept moving, and then in editing I made it look like it all happened in like one take. But those 3 are all stolen. Like they're just me loving Poltergeist moments.
They're
and
homages.
how iconic. Yeah, exactly.
Not stolen, they're homages.
Yeah.
Got it. This house is clean though. I think I can't be the only one. Jim Carrey from Ace Ventura had to ruin that for all of us, right?
Oh yes,
and, like
100%.
I have exorcised the demons. Like another thing. It's like I can't help but think of the parody before the real thing, but the real thing is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, The Simpsons did the really great episode. I think is the first Halloween episode where they did the house, like the Simpsons move into this house and whatever. And there's this scene that Homer goes into the basement, and there's like all of the graves down there, and it's like, ancient Indian burial ground or whatever. And that always ruined like the concept for me because I saw that first. Like I knew about that for years, so I was always like, it's almost like the parody overtakes the original and it becomes more of a parody. So it's hard to like take that concept and be like, no, they did it first. Like this is the right one.
I mean, that happens with anything. My wife's favorite movie is not another teen movie, and she's like, wait. Like she's all that, right? She's like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, no, that's right, and you can't watch that now if that's your favorite movie.
Yeah, exactly.
That's like, I mean, the whole thing of the time is the iconic Eddie Murphy stand-up of like he literally goes, the Poltergeist is out. It's like #1 in theaters, and he was like, it was between white and black families, and he was like, get out of the house. He's like, all right, bye.
Yeah,
like, and it's a great, and I'm with you. They you can't not think of it, but so that ends, and most other movies you would end here.
Exactly.
Maybe one other little scare. This is when, like I said, I watched this earlier, and my wife's Laura, she goes, is this almost over? She wasn't watching. She was like on her phone, and there's some time. Go, I was like, go, like, I think she took a shower or something and was still going. But yeah, then that's when it's cranked up. I think that last 10 minutes, right, 15 is as scary as it gets. That's when you said, Joe bet the tub.
Yes.
And then she goes over into the bedroom, she checks the kids, and she does look like she's gonna kind of relax on the bed a little bit, and then it cuts to the kids, and the clown wraps around and it does have a demon face, and Carol Ann's holding on again to the fucking to the bed frame,
Yep.
and it's how upsetting it is actually watching Jo Beth Williams being dragged up and down all around the room, and I mean that's 2 years before Nightmare on Elm Street does that. Like I
Yeah,
said, and
and
there's
in a PG movie.
in a PG movie, and she's in her underwear.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I said, there that scene, knowing after today, it's supposed to be like more of a disturbingly sexual, makes it even more apparent when I watch that scene.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and if you haven't seen it, look up the iconography of like the tentacle monster she's in. It looks like it would have been really very Sam Raimi kind of
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen that.
There's no footage of it. It's just
Right.
stills from a thing.
Right.
And so she's getting rolled around in the room, and the kids are going, and I mean, the house has just turned. It won't let her in. It's zapping everything. It's truly like the kid. It needs those kids.
So, and I think it's interesting that this movie does this because you have that iconic "this house is clean" moment, and it's so well shot and so well crafted that we truly believe the movie's over. Every time I watch it, I still am like, "Oh, there's still more though."
You could have told
you
me
almost forget like every time that
you
it's
could
not over.
you could have told me they drove to the motel after that scene, and
Yeah,
I would have been like,
exactly.
yeah, I forgot that happens. The pool happens during the cleaning.
Yeah.
One thing I want to note, and I forget where I watched it. I think Jo Beth Williams, I don't know if it's part of the cursed, stories of this, had like hotel room haunting experiences during the filming of this movie, and I forget if it's in those docs or if I saw. Do you remember A&E had a biography, Celebrity Hauntings? A&E channel had a series called Celebrity Hauntings.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure she told hers on that.
Right on.
They were well done. It was like creepy stories. I remember like the actor who played Bubba from Forrest Gump, had a story about something.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, just remembered I watched that, and I can't remember if it was from that or I'm just thinking it's a segment. But yeah, she would go to her room at night, and apparently things would just be like moved around where she was staying.
I remember hearing this. I don't remember where I heard this, but she would go back to her hotel, and it would be like pictures were like on a slant every time she would come in and stuff like that.
So anyway, I just had to get that out there while we're talking about it. But anyway, this ending, right? So she's going out and she can't get into the thing, so she runs outside and starts screaming for the neighbors and help. And she falls into the swimming pool, which is just a swamped pit of mud because it's raining so heavy, and the skeletons are coming out of the ground, and the coffins are grazing out. And I actually forgot the sheer volume of like skeletons and coffins.
It's a lot, and apparently real.
Yeah, that's apparently where they believe if there was a curse introduced in this movie came from, because it is cheaper to get human skulls from like donations than it is to do the props. I believe that technique, if I'm not mistaken, Filmmaker said we still use that today.
I wouldn't not believe it if someone told me. Like, it seems like it could be legit. I have never used a real human skull, but
you could have mine when I pass. It's on recording, so
yeah,
we'll,
I'll take it.
All right, great.
Yeah, I also heard this might be a rumor too. I don't know for sure, but it's just a fun fact. And kind of hit home for me. That pool scene, she was terrified to get in the water because they were running so much electrical gear. You have your lights set up and everything. So Spielberg was actually in the pool while all of that was being filmed as well.
Yeah.
Which to me, that sounds like Spielberg was just having fun and was like, "I'm gonna get in the pool too." Like he just went and did whatever he wanted on this movie
That's
set.
great. I did hear Keep Her Comfort. Yeah, there's out there like the next scene with the kind of the clown, the mechanical kind of stopped working, almost actually choked the kid out.
Yeah, I heard that too.
Like,
yeah.
Very it's anyone worth listening and anyone listening, it's worth it to go read and watch these docs and stuff on the curse because it is interesting. But there's also heartbreaking shit in it.
Yeah.
So
I will
say
this
movie is sad.
I've worked on a few movies, and I can tell you, like, things go wrong on every movie. Like, it happens. So, like, the animatronic not working properly and almost choking the kid, like, that does not surprise me in the least.
No,
I have been on a ton of sets where I'm like, oh, that's not good. So, these things happen a lot.
Yeah. So, kid almost, the wraps. She does get them out of the room because the neighbors save her out of the pool.
Yes.
She's like, we got to go inside. And the neighbor's like, we saved you. Your kids, they're done. She runs up the steps and blah, 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 and gets them out and finds thing. And I do love that we do get a representation of now the closet is this living organism that's actually going to suck them in. Like, the house is alive now. It's not even a ethereal portal, right? And the ghost floating around. It's alive. It controls everything. And she runs out with the kids, and Coach pulls up with with his boss. And, even Dana is coming over soon. But now commotion. People are coming out of her house. And that's earlier we were saying this when she's like, the bodies? Like, he's so angry. He gets in the car and he can't get the keys. And that was frustrating me so much. Fumbling around. And they get their other daughter. And they drive off hitting all these cars.
Yeah.
And then the whole town just watches this house just fold like
collide in on itself.
Yeah, a kaleidoscope.
Yep.
And then we followed them to the hotel, and to our knowledge, they're safe. And then that swelling, happy music plays again, but it doesn't end as happy. I mean, there's just the graveyard is coming alive out of the ground, but our family has run away.
Yes, which I love. One of my favorite things about this movie is that they spend the whole time, like, not just leaving to end on a note that is like, you could have just went and stayed at a hotel from the beginning. Like, the second stuff started going wrong. I love that. I love the fact that we watched this whole thing, this whole hour and a half long movie, a 2-hour movie.
Yeah,
it ends on a note where it's just like, oh, we could have been done with this so much quicker than we were, but I'm glad we got to go on the adventure with them.
No, and you point that out, and I'm so glad because I always think that, but I'm always like, well, they had to stay back for Carol Ann. But then you think back a little further, it's like, no, the minute that the chairs started stacking on each other, they could have left.
Right.
There's no, it's not The Conjuring, right? It's not like, well, if you leave, you're still fucked because there's an entity onto you.
Right.
I never thought of it that way because I'm always like, well, they're there. They're only staying because their daughter's disappeared. But that's not true.
It's not true. And even at that, like, even if my kid disappeared, I just don't. I would be hard pressed to be like, once we're back, I'm not staying there. I'm not taking a bath.
Oh no,
like, I'm getting
like,
the hell out of there. And yeah, but I love that we get to go there. Like, that's the flaw of logic makes for a more fun film for me.
Yeah, no, that now I'm gonna think of that flaw because you're right. They should immediately, and we already established they're well-off family. Well and often if they want to stay in a hotel for like 2 weeks, they can easily do that.
let's just see what the house does a little bit
Yeah,
more. Like,
let me lock the door with my kids in the room where the activity happened, because the beds are still there.
yeah, exactly.
Even Robbie being comfortable with it, because I get it, Caroline doesn't remember. Robbie, I'd be like,
I'm not
I'm not
staying here, Mom.
sleeping ever again.
Yeah, Mom, I am not. You are not leaving my side for a month.
You know what? I watched. I just watched. I will be wrapping up soon, I assume, but I just watched a movie, a Shudder original, and I'm blanking on the name. Anyway, they do that at the end. It's a couple that gets a home invasion,
Okay.
and the movie ends, and she's like, and I'm glad I'm not saying the name, because if anyone ever wants to watch, and they're like, oh, I've got over it. She's over the trauma, and the couple's better now. And then it gives you a little stinger at the end of, actually, the people that invaded are back, and this couple's gonna die. We're just not gonna show it on screen.
Yeah.
And it's that same thing as the Poltergeist of like, y'all. So even the husband goes, "You don't want to move," and she's like, "No, we love living here," or something like.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh. Anyway, I don't remember. I think it's like guests or house invites. It was alright.
Okay.
Nothing. But anyway, anything you wanted to add on our Poltergeist conversation? I feel like we covered everything I love about the movie and a lot to it in our short time talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this movie is just something completely different than what
Mhm.
most horror fans talk about because, you know, it is PG. It would be PG-13 if it was made now, obviously, but
Mhm.
it is so dark and so fun, and it does weird things. It takes these odd risks, and
Mhm.
it does stuff like you said. One of my favorite things in a movie is when a movie that has kept me interested, if I'm watching a movie and I've been interested in it for an hour, and then you expect it to end or you expect it to go a certain
Mhm.
way, and then it doesn't. It changes it up, and it
Mhm.
keeps you guessing what's going to happen. If you watch either of my movies, you'll see that's what I do. That's what I love. And Poltergeist is sort of the epitome of that. It's a 3-act structure, but not in a simple way. It
No,
really,
and
its structure really bounces around, and I love that it keeps me guessing. And just movies like that get me.
it's great. I'll leave it at that because it's simple too, right? Like I have the Wikipedia up to my right just to help us out, and sometimes they're like 9, 10. It's a whole book that people write them out. This is 5 short paragraphs.
Yeah,
This is out just to tell us what's going on, and you know what Wikipedia's could be, and it's popular enough. And you're right, it's these turns, and it's simple, but it surprises you. I love it, man.
it's a slice of life horror movie in a really smart way. And I love you said it with the Wikipedia only being 4 paragraphs. You can explain this movie in very, very simple terms. It's a haunted house movie. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a haunted house movie. That is literally all it is.
Yeah.
And yet it's compelling from beginning to end.
All right. So, Josh, where can everyone find you and get in touch with you? And
Well, for now, I'm on Twitter
same here.
as long as
Yeah.
Twitter lasts.
Yeah.
I at Josh Stifter. I'm also at Flush Studios on Instagram.
Uh-huh.
JoshStifter.com is where you can see where my stuff is. And Good Exorcist, my first movie, is available on Tubi or Amazon or pretty much
This is
everywhere you could
all
buy.
those, I
And
think, Roku
Troma.
Network.
If you want to buy the Blu-ray, it's on Troma. Great Blu-ray. And then Greywood's Plot, my second movie, is available everywhere as well.
Great.
So yeah,
Great. I love that. I can't wait to watch and get that Blu-ray as well.
right on.
All right. You can find us here at the Flyover State of Film, and as Josh said, as long as Twitter is active, we will be. All right. Well, stay frightful, everyone. Bye. Welcome to Flyover State of Fear.